For as long as I can remember, the label "Made in China" was a sure sign that whatever the label was attached to wasn't exactly a benchmark for quality, which is okay if it's a cheap pair of shoes or one of those toys you get inside a Christmas cracker, but it's not so okay if you're talking about cars. And at this point, I'd like to introduce the Chery QQ3 into evidence. I had the misfortune of driving this car in 2008, and it remains, quite simply, one of the worst cars I've ever driven. It excelled only at being horrendous in every aspect of its makeup. In fact, it was so bad that not even its billing as South Africa's cheapest car could save it. And now, Chery, makers of the abominable QQ3, have given us another car to worry about. The J1. It is a bigger car with a bigger engine, so it should have bigger appeal, and it is almost twice the price of the QQ3. But I'll tell you now, it's not nearly twice the car. But then again, cars and their pricing never work that way anyway. I will say that the J1 is a scarily large improvement though. For starters, it's not a rip-off of a copy of a 14-year-old design, and to be fair, it is fairly decent looking. A little plain in some respects, but certainly not ugly. It has a Fiat Panda type stance and some upmarket elements like the alloy wheels and the front fog lights. The rear could compete with the best Korean designs, although that's not really saying much, is it? Still, it doesn't exactly want to make you run screaming for the hills. Strip the stigma of it being a Chinese import, and your first impression of the J1 may even be favourable. I know mine was, but that's because in the back of my mind I had the expectation of it being just another QQ3. When I saw that it was in fact a fairly original and decent looking thing, a smile began to cross my face. But inevitably I had to get in, and then my smile gave way for some quizzical looks because there are some very odd things going on in here. It starts down here with a handbrake lever, which isn't really a lever, just a flat bit of plastic. Then there's the gear shift, which is all a bit skew. Then there's the chrome beading in the steering wheel, which you as the driver don't even see. And then the instrument cluster, which is slightly offset to one side. None of it is really horrible, it's just odd. And the door pockets are practically useless. You could fit an ID book in there at a squeeze, but good luck getting it out again. The rest of the interior is fairly admirable once you get past the vast expanses of cheap-feeling silver plastics, and it's not short of equipment. Aircon, electric windows all round, electric mirrors, radio with CD player, MP3 and USB. At night it all lights up in a rather cool blue colour, and there's enough to keep you comfortable, even if the grey-green material combo leaves you feeling a little queasy. It is a fairly comfortable thing to drive, although it does have its problems. The raised ride height makes it a little bit wallowy, especially when you start picking up speed. And then there are the things that are seriously irritating, like the clutch that takes way too early, and the steering that's a bit like our government's policy on Zimbabwe, all a bit vague and you're not really sure where it's taking you. So while it's not perfect, the J1 has its good points, not least of which are the dual airbags and ABS with EBD fitted as standard. Unfortunately, one of the most important things in any car, the engine, is this car's weakest point. It's a 61 kilowatt, 114 Newton meter 1300, and it is simply horrible. I don't know what the 0 to 100 time is, but I'd imagine it's around the 3.5 hour mark. And top speed? Anywhere between 90 and 126, depending on the steepness of the hill. It's just so constipated. You have to push it to get anything out of it, and then it starts making all the wrong noises. There's this high-pitched whine at about 2,500 RPM, and it gets this really agonizing scream once you get past 4,000 RPM. It just ruins the whole thing. Part of the blame has to go to the gearbox, which has ratios that are just too tall for such a puny engine. So while it's okay to look at and fairly comfortable to sit in, driving the J1 isn't the greatest experience in the world. But that's not the real reason we should all be worried. I've only ever driven 2 Cherys, and those drives were 2 years apart. Now the J1 definitely has its faults, but considering the improvements the company has made in a relatively short space of time, if they keep developing at that rate, the Chinese are definitely going to take over the world. These days, 1300 motors have the ability to impress, but the 61 kilowatt unit in the J1 certainly doesn't. The badly designed gearbox doesn't help much either. Being a budget car, the cabin's materials have a budget feel, but the spec level is surprisingly good, unlike the ride setup. Still, Chery is getting better with every model they produce.